Hi, welcome back to Educator.com's AP Music Theory course. Today's lesson is part writing, first inversion, triads. So the objectives for this lesson are, first we're going to learn how to integrate first inversion triads into the root position part writing exercises that we've been doing. And in the course of doing that, we're going to see some common patterns of how first inversion triads are used. And also, of course, we're going to see the common doublings for when we're working in this four-part voice leading texture. So first of all, let's look at a simple root position progression like we did in the previous lesson, and see how we can substitute some first inversion chords into it. So let's just take something simple in C major, like what if we just have some tonic harmony, some 1 moving to some subdominant harmony, and then of course moving through the dominant and back home to the tonic. So I'll just keep this with the bass line for now, so we can see that the bass line moves from 1 to 4 to 5 to 1, all in root position. And so one of the main uses of first inversion chords is to give more variety to the bass line. So we can rewrite this progression down here. And now, maybe instead of repeating this tonic chord the same way, I will make the second one first inversion chord, a 6 chord, and which happens to lead nicely to this F, the 4. And the other thing I can do, on subdominant bass note, when you have the 4th scale degree, of course, you can either use a 4 or now a 2-6, which gives a nice different character, the minor chord versus the major chord. And then maybe I want the 5 chord here, and then what about a 5-6? So I have now a half step in the bass between the second to the last and the last chord. So we can see here that what I've done is just substituted, remembering that first inversion chords are, of course, with the 3rd of the chord in the bass. So what I've done here is substituted the 2nd chord here for a first inversion, and here the same, and here the same. Now the only difference is that with the 4 chord, I didn't change it to a 4-6, but what I did was kept the same bass note and changed the sonority above. So 4 and 2-6 are, of course, also interchangeable when we have this subdominant note in the bass. It's a good thing to keep in mind when you're harmonizing over bass lines. Okay, and now let's complete the upper voices of this exercise so we can see what sorts of doublings work out with these chords. So what if I start with a closed spacing here on this 1 chord? So you see I've doubled the root, of course, and then the other voices are all as compact as possible. And now moving to this next chord, actually I can just keep these voices all the same, and so what ends up happening is that the voice in the soprano has been doubled. So I've got 1 C now and 2 E's. And now, of course, we're moving to a 4 chord. So the first thing I need to do is be careful of parallels. So this E is moving to an F, so I don't want to move this E to an F. So let's move it down to a C. And then I need another F and an A, so I'll move the G to an F and the C to an A. And now we're keeping the same bass note and changing this to a 6 chord, so what's missing is a D now, so what I can do is keep over the common tones, the F and the A, and then move the C up to a D. And now we're moving from this 2-6 to a G major chord, so we can keep, let's see, we want to avoid any kind of parallels, so we want to be careful about this F. So we'll take this F down to D, and then we can move this A down to G to give us our doubled root, and then this D will move down to B. And now we're keeping the same chord, but we don't want to double, we don't want to just keep all these voices over to the next chord because we have the leading tone in the bass. So we want to be careful not to double that. So we'll keep this D and we'll keep this G, and the B will move up to a D. So again, like this first 6 chord, we're again doubling the note that's in the soprano here. And now we just want to complete our little cadence here. So we've got a C, so we can move, keep this common tone, G, and move this D up to E, and this D down to C. So basically this covers ways to double the 6 chord, what notes to double in these different contexts of moving from chord to chord. So there's a few kind of patterns that you see over and over with first inversion chords and how they're used. The first one of those that we can talk about is parallel first inversion chords. So often times you'll have a bass line that moves predominantly by step, maybe something like this. And so what we will see here is that most of these chords are simply, can be harmonized as parallel 6 chords, just all moving together in steps. Of course, there's a 1 here, and looking at this bass line, here's the 5 here, and moving to a 6 here. And of course, here's the final 1. And the rest of these can all just be thought of as this kind of parallel moving 6 chords. So here, this would be a 5-6, and this would be a 4-6, and then here, not here, but here, let's see, this would be a 1-6. Oh, here's the 1-6 to a 7-6, and here's 2-6 and 3-6. So let's see what that looks like with all the voices. So let's see, we can start out with this sort of sonority, and then moving to the 5-6 means we want to double anything but the leading tone. So let's see, can keep this G here, and so I'll double the D like this, actually. And then now when it's moving in parallel, the best thing to do is to just have 3 voices in the upper part, so we can kind of stop worrying about this extra D here and just move down C and an F here. And then this moves to a 5 chord, so now we want the rest of the voices back, so B, D, G. And then this is our old progression that we learned from last lesson, which is root position triads moving by step. So we just want to use as much contrary motion as possible to avoid parallels. So let's see, we can have 2 C's here and an E here. And now we're moving back to these parallel 6 chords, so we'll have a B and an E, and then A and a D, and then G, C, and then F, B. So basically what's happening here is these chords, these are moving in fourths, and you always want to be careful to keep these as parallel fourths and not fifths, of course. And now moving from this diminished chord to 1, the only other consideration is that we have this tritone here, which is part of the diminished chord. So we want to make sure to resolve that outwards. So the F moves down to an E, and the B, the leading tone, moves up to a C. And we can even complete the triad by putting the G in here. So this is a good example of parallel first inversion chords. And the next thing you'll see with 6 chords is using them in sequence. And the most common sequence for 6 chords is where we are trying to make this bass line happen, just moving up by a step. And so how we'll do that is, of course, doing it this way can be a problem just because of the voice leading that would be involved. So what we can do is we can add in another harmony here and turn each of these into a 6 chord. So this turns into a 6/6, and then the 2 turns into a 7 diminished 6, and then we can even keep going with the 3 becoming a 1/6, and then we'll complete it with a cadence here. So you can just say 4, 5, and then back to 1. So let's see what that looks like. So C, E, G, C, and now we can keep these tones. Let's see here. E, and then the G moves up to A, and let's use this kind of doubling again, doubling the note in the soprano. So, and then this is a lot easier to move to this chord than it would have been to move the 1 in root position. So the 6/6 to 2, we can just take the F, the E up to an F, the A carries over, of course, and then the E up here goes down to D, giving us the complete D minor chord with a doubled root. And then now we're going to have the same kind of motion here. So we've got a D, and then keep the F here, and then move the A up to B, and the D up to F. And now, of course, it's going to be the exact same motion that we had from the 6/6 to the 2, from the 7/6 to the 3. So let's see what happens here. So the F moves up to G, and then the B stays on a B, and the F up here moves down to an E. And so, of course, this pattern can repeat over and over until you want to break out of it. So let's keep it going until the cadence. So let's see. G, C, G, and then G moves up to A, C stays on C, and G down to F. And now we're back in this familiar territory, so we just need contrary motion again between 4 and 5. So G, B, D, and then we can make a cadence here by keeping the common tone and moving B to C and D to E. So this was an example of the root position to 6th first inversion sequence. Okay, for our first example of a sample question, we can look at a given bass line and harmonize it, and we'll know that we are to include both root position triads and first inversion chords. So let's do something in C major, and say we're given a bass line like this. So C, B, C, A, F, G, C. Okay, so the first thing we can do is, of course, know that the first chord will be a 1, and the last chord probably will be a 1, and of course the chord preceding that will be a 5. So we set up our first chord and our cadence, and now we can go through and look at the other bass notes and think about the possibilities. And in doing that, we should look at where the bass notes are headed. So we have this C moving to a B that moves back to a C. So the most common pattern by far for this bass line would be what we saw in the last slide, which is making this a 5/6 back to a 1. And now we've got this move through this A and this F, which lead back to 5, which means we need some kind of subdominant here. And if we remember from before, we have the option of making this now a root position 4 or a 2/6. So let's go ahead and make it a 2/6 just to practice writing more 6 chords. And of course, this A can either be a root position A minor chord, which would be a 6 in C major, or could make it a 4 in first inversion. And let's make it a minor chord. So now we've got the whole progression laid out, and all we need to do is fill in the upper voices and use good voice leading. So let's start with this initial sonority. And now let's move to the 5/6 by keeping this G and not doubling the B, the leading tone. So we'll move to D and G. And now we can move right back to the original sonority. And then this is something we've done in the previous lesson. So moving from 1 to 6, we have 2 common tones, the C and the E, and then the G just moves up by step to A. And now we're moving to this 2/6, which means that we have an F and we have an A, and let's move the C to a D. And actually let's move both of the notes to a D, so we'll double the D. And then moving to the 5, so we have a G in the bass, and we need another G here, and we can keep this D up here and move the other one to the B for the leading tone, and then complete this familiar cadence progression, just like in the last one, with G holding over and then C and E. Okay, and for another example, let's practice writing out one of those 5/6 sequences. So from root position to first inversion, and let's say we're in G major for this one. So I'll include the key signature. So if we start on G, and then we move through A, and then B, and then we can finish with a cadence again, so C, D, G. So of course this is going to be 1, and this is going to be a 6 chord, which means that it's a 6/6. And then here's 2, and we can go ahead and write out all the root position chords first. 3, 4, 5, 1. So this becomes a 7 diminished 6, and this becomes a 1/6. So let's look at the upper voices for this. B, D, G. And now we're moving to this E minor chord, which means we can keep this B here. And then we can double the E. And now moving to a 2, which is this A minor chord. So we can move the B down to A, and then keep one of the E's, and the other one goes to C. And now we've got this F sharp diminished chord, so we can keep the A here. Actually, we move this A down to F sharp, and then keep the C here, and then move this E up to the other F sharp. And now moving to the root position B minor, so we can keep this F sharp here, and C goes down to B, and then F sharp to D, and then 1/6 chord, so F sharp now moves to G, and we can keep these other 2 voices here. And now we're back in familiar territory of finishing out this cadence. So moving to a 4 chord, we want to be careful of any kind of parallels with this. So let's see, we can keep this G here, and then we can move the B. Let's see, so we don't want to move it to a C or else we'll have parallels, so we can move it down to, well, let's move it up to the E, and then the E, or the D that was up here, we can move to, let's see, we can also move it to the E. And then going to the 5 chord, so we'll move the E down to to, well, move it up to F sharp, and this one down to D, and the G will go to, let's see, can't move it to A, so we'll move it to, let's see, D down here. And then moving to the final chord, so we've got F sharp going to G, and then D going, staying on D, and then this D will jump up 6 to B. Okay, for our third example, let's just look at little short examples of parallel 6 chords. So let's say we're given a bass line in F major. And are asked to supply parallel 6 chords over this. So for the first chord, we want to keep it in root position, and same for the last chord. So from 1 moving through 5. So if we know that these are 6 chords, then we know that this here is going to be a 5-6, and this is going to be a 4-6. So let's look at the voice leading here. So we can start with this closed spacing, and then moving to this C major chord. So we can move to G, C, G. And now moving down to this chord, this B flat major chord. So we want to be careful of parallels again now because we have 4 voices. So let's move this G down to an F, and this C to a D, and then this G we can move it to a B flat. And now all we have to do is connect this to this 5 without any other parallels. So let's see, we can move F to an E, and the D to an E, well actually the D to a C, and the B flat down to G. And for our last example, let's look at another bass line with some common 6 chord bass movements in it. So let's say we're given, let's go back to C major, and let's say we're given something like this: C, D, E, and then what about G, B, C. So of course the first thing we can do is look at the first and last chords and see that they are 1, and know that because of the cadence there will be a 5 chord before the 1. So in this case it is a 5 chord, but it's of course in first inversion, so here's one of our 6 chords. And now we have this stepwise bass line moving up from C. So of course we could write 1, 2, 3 here in root position, but we don't want to do that because the voice leading will be funny. So we can use 6 chords to make it smoother. So of course this will be a 7 diminished 6, and then this will be a 1-6. And this is by far the most common way to harmonize this bass line. You almost never see it as 1, 2, 3 all in root position. And then this G, of course, is a nice 5 chord. So let's look at this voice leading. So C, E, G, moving to, let's see, B, D, F. So we can move to F here, and then can move down to, this E can move down to a B, and this C can jump down to an F. And then moving back to C major will be G, C, E. And then from here, moving to 5, keep the common tone, and these 2 voices can just move down to B and D. And then stop doubling the leading tone on this 6 chord. And now just making a cadence back to C and making sure we have a complete triad. So G stays, D down to C, and then we need an E. So here it is. All right, thanks for watching Educator.com's AP Music Theory course. See you next time.